Are you gonna, oh,
Okay, so as I was saying a minute ago, we are studying the book of Tobit in the Apocrypha. We can't dive right into the book. We have to kind of skim the surface of the book for a few minutes because as we've been preparing for this, we've been throwing around a few terms. I'm going to throw out one, you throw out another. We've used the word Apocrypha. What other words have we used? What else have we called it? Somebody said it already before we even started. Deuterocanonical books. And
Yeah, we throw that out all the time. Conversation.
third one is one we used last time, and it's about where the book is usually placed in the Bible when it's not in the canon, and where is it usually when it's not. If you have one, you would know. I guess if you don't have one, you don't know. It is usually placed between the Old Testament and the New Testament.
Oh.
So what is the difference, or what is an apocryphal book versus a deuterocanonical book versus a intertestamental book, which is the third title? And the answer is nothing. There's no difference. The two terms are synonymous, and that is apocryphal and deuterocanonical. And the third term, intertestamental, is just a books in between the testaments, is just a geographic location. It tells you where the books are. So if you know that the in between the Old and New Testament is the Apocrypha or the deuterocanonical books, you don't have to say that. You can just say it's the intertestamental books.
What does the word Deutero mean?
Yes.
I know it sounds like there's Deuteronomy, and it's two.
And Deuteronomy is the second telling of the thing too.
What is Deuterocanonical?
Deuterocanonical is the second canon. That's all it is.
Okay.
So we've got Apocrypha. You know, the apocryphal word Apocrypha is hidden. So the apocryphal books are the hidden books, and the deuterocanonical books are the books of the second canon. So you have the description of the books, apocryphal books, and then you have the description, and then you have the description of the books as the description of the book Apocrypha and what the books represent, hidden knowledge. Then you have deuterocanonical, which is a description of the books as they were received by the church, the second canon. And intertestamental, you have the description of the books as where they're located in the physical reality of Scripture between the two canons.
So I thought I knew what it meant when somebody said that's apocryphal, or that's an apocryphal statement.
That means it's hidden and weird.
Or I thought it meant that's just kind of like a one-off.
Yeah, it's knowledge that's not readily available or readily accessible.
Oh.
So you're gonna have to do some digging to get to the bottom of it. So now, how do we get it? So I'm just gonna I'm trying to put this together. I made some notes so I could condense it down because I don't want to take an hour to talk about this, right? The canon of the church is the church coming together at some point in time and agreeing on all of the books that we have in the Bible that are available to us, whether it's Old Testament or New Testament. What books are actually books that are going to be included in the Scripture because of a standard. So the Christian church really didn't set the New Testament, but did not set the Old Testament. Now, saying that, all the apocryphal books are the Old Testament. So let's see how this happened. Part of it is political and part of it is reactionary. The canon of the Old Testament was closed between 140 and 40 BC during the Hasmonean dynasty. The Hasmoneans were the descendants of the Maccabees. You remember back in your Old Testament history, the Maccabees had the revolt against Rome, and there was a big brouhaha. So this is the Hasmonean dynasty lasted till about 40 BC. So it was during that time that the canon of the Old Testament was closed. So there was a lot of debate. It's the same for the New Testament, why and what would be in the Old Testament. And this is in part why. You know that during the time of Jesus, the Sadducees, right? Sadducees don't believe in the resurrection of the dead. And they don't believe that God is communicating through prophets. What they believe is that God started and finished pretty much everything God wanted to tell us through the time of Moses. So they follow the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch. And that's all.
So that's where they get this deal. The further from Moses it is, the less worthwhile it is.
Yes. Yes. So you've got, at the time of Jesus, this is using as a yardstick, you have the two big political parties, think Democrats and Republicans. You've got the Sadducees that believe that the canon is 5 books, that's it. And then you have the Pharisee, who believe the canon is the 5 books plus the prophets, the law and the prophets. We've heard that phrase a lot, right? Jesus came for the law and the prophets, because Jesus would be considered to be a Pharisee. If he was put into a party, he would be a Pharisee in his belief, not in his behavior. Obviously, the Pharisees were very law-based, rule-based. That was not what Jesus was doing. So all of this went into the mix. Everybody's thinking, what do we do? How do we do this to get the books of the Bible or the Old Testament, and that it was just a testament set? And they did that, and they did that, rounding out the books of the Old Testament by about, well, we think about by about 40 BC. Okay, and the thing about the books that they chose was that all the books that they chose were written in Hebrew. They chose no books written in Greek. Now, why would there be Old Testament books written in Greek? Because way back around 330, Alexander the Great conquered the world. And one of the things that he wanted to do, just like Rome wants to make roads across the world, and all the roads lead to Rome, right? And he wanted to educate the entire world in Greek, kind of like we've done with English around the world, and make this common language that everybody could communicate in Greek. And so even the Jews began to write in Greek. Now, remember too that the Jews are splattered all over creation, because they've been conquered by everybody in creation, and the Syrians and the Babylonians and the Persians, and everybody's been running around. So it's called the diaspora. They're all over the place. And the ones who are not in the Holy Land are in Greek speaking cities and towns, right? So they wrote their scriptures in Greek. So many of the books of the Deuterocanonical or the Apocrypha books are written in Greek. So they were not going to be included in the Hebrew canon from the get-go, because they weren't written in Hebrew. The Hasmonean dynasty was very nervous about the faith, the Jewish faith being diluted by the influence of the Greek-speaking world. It was, this fear of the, not the come heres, but it would be the people returning back from the diaspora and have been lived in captivity, and now are coming back into the Holy Land, and they've been living a Greek life, and they've embraced Greek culture, and they have Greek traditions, and they don't know their Jewish tradition. And the Hasmoneans were saying, we're going to lose all this. So they became the protectors. And because of that, they did not allow any of the books in their canon to be written in Greek. So these books, Tobit included, was not included in the canon because it was written in Greek.
Now, were the Hasmoneans a specific people, or was that a belief system?
Oh no, it's the people. It's the name. The Hasmonean dynasty is just like Ming dynasty is the name of the guys, right? Yeah. So okay, so we got this. Okay, yeah, 100. Oppression, marine pollution, about being respect to it. Okay, so now we move along and jump forward, because as we get into the time of right about 400 AD, we have the canon of the Christian church has been completed, and everything becomes a standard at this point. But there are actually 3 standards. There's a 66 kind of book standard for the Old Testament, but there's also a 73 kind of standard, and then even an 88 standard. So where did all these books come from? Well, it's because at different places, the books were included or not included into that original canon, and they included the Greek books, because the Greek most of the Christian church was outside of Israel, right? After the first century. So everywhere outside of the first century, all around the diaspora, all the Christians being converted, all the Gentiles being converted, they all speak Greek, and they have been exposed to these books. because these books were written in Greek and circulated around outside of Israel.
And the New Testament was written in Greek, correct?
Yes, Aramaic and Greek.
Okay.
So it would make sense that these books would then be included into the canon as they were proposed. But even that really solidified it at the time of Jerome when he wrote the Vulgate, translating the Bible into Latin, and included all the books in the Latin translation. And the Latin translation, the Vulgate, took us all the way up to 1500. So for all that time to 1500, all the books that you see as the apocryphal books here were included in the Old Testament canon because they were in the Latin Vulgate. But what happened in 1500? Dun, dun, dun.
Plague. No, that happened in 1300.
Oh, there's always a plague. It was the Protestant Reformation hit around middle of 1500, and one of the big Martin Luther, and we can't get into all that because that's really something or other. There's lots of different reasons why the Protestant Reformation came about. Remember now, the Anglican Church was not part of the Protestant Reformation. And even though we're banned around this word a lot today, and we're thrown into the big pot of the Protestant description of Protestants, Anglicans, strictly speaking, are not Protestants. In fact, Henry VIII spoke out against Protestantism and was rewarded for doing that by the Pope as he was consecrated a defender of the faith. The only people that are consecrated defender of the faith are bishops. So when a bishop is consecrated, he's consecrated a bishop and defender of the faith. The Pope consecrated the only person in history to be consecrated a defender of the faith, but not a bishop. It's Henry VIII. And this is why, just as a side note, this is how, when he fought the church on the annulment with Catherine of Aragon, not divorce, that didn't happen, the annulment, he did it on the basis of his authority as an officer of the church, a defender of the faith. So he was standing on the grounds of canonical authority in the same way that a bishop would. Okay, so enough of that.
A quick question again.
Yeah.
I thought the King of England always has been a defender of the faith since then. Is that
Yes.
true?
They have carried the title down. It's on the royal seal, and it's been passed down from king to queen now. But it was originally a consecration issue, and it would have been only Henry consecrated the defender of the faith. And then when he died, it would be the end, just like if a bishop died. But he took it on at that point and said, I'm defender of the faith as the King of England. And so the king and then the queen became the defender of the faith and the monarch of the church, the head of the church, just like the queen is the head of, or the king now is the head of the church in England. Although they've been a figurehead for many hundreds of years now. They've not been running the church and still don't run the church. It's the Archbishop of Canterbury that runs the church.
I don't think they run the government either anymore, do they?
No, they don't. They don't do anything but live lavishly and have, don't even know what a dollar is, or they just spend money. They have no idea how that works. Okay, so
because they don't use dollars.
these books were added. Along comes Luther. Luther was a Roman Catholic or Latin church monk. He was a member of the church. He'd been in his church as a monastery, as a monk, as a religious for most of his life, his adult life. He was a teacher of the Psalms at a seminary, and he began the Reformation simply by putting up on the bulletin board a seminar to talk about issues of the faith. And a local priest got that and sent it on off to Rome because they said it's dissension, and it wasn't dissension. And if it hadn't been made a big deal, the question has always been, would there ever have been a Protestant Reformation, at least in the way that it came? Because Luther would have had his little seminar. He had seminars all the time and talked about these knotty issues, and then everybody would have gone away and the seminar would have been over and they would have done something else. So one of the things that was happening in that seminar was the question of indulgences. Now we all know what an indulgence is, right? So, and an indulgence says that you can do works of contrition. Now this is the problem. This is what got the Latin Church in big trouble, because indulgences are still available to Roman Catholics today. There are many fewer now, but they are still available. So an indulgence says that if you perform an act of contrition, that you have changed your life, amended your life, and you are acting on that in your life, then you have pleased God. You're now living a life that is bringing pleasure to God. God is happy with you, so that you will shorten your time. It all makes sense, right? You'll shorten your time in purgatory, the place that you're going to work off the bad years and become perfected for heaven. And the way that you would do that is becoming a better person, right? So it makes sense. Think about it. If you've got a group of kids and you got some kids they all doing a job, they all clean up the room, and you tell them, whoever cleans up the room the best gets to go first. So their act of contrition is to work hard and clean the rooms, and the ones that clean it really well get to go out first, and the ones who don't have to stay longer. So indulgences are just the same. All right, where the church
lots of money.
Yeah, well, this is the problem. This is the heresy, right? This is what Luther pointed out. What they were doing was a scam, and everybody knew it. And in the church, so what they were doing was not offering indulgences as an act of contrition. They were offering indulgences as a pay for play thing, where they weren't asking people to do an act of contrition. You don't have to do an act of contrition. You just have to give them some money. And giving the church money is an act of faith, and faith gets you time off in purgatory. And that's not right. That's not what the doctrine's all about, because that's called penance. And penance and contrition are not the same thing. So Luther was going all on. Now, why does this make any sense to Tobit? Okay, because remember, up until this time, they're using the Latin Vulgate, and Tobit and Maccabees, Second Maccabees, were in the book, right? But there is Maccabees. If we get that if we study more of the intertestamental books, Maccabees at its core is very central and very strong. And in fact, it is one of the governing texts for the Latin Church about indulgences. It also has very clear scripture references to what would become purgatory. So you want to say to the Roman Catholic brothers and sisters, you say, that's a terrible doctrine. It's not even in the Bible. Never says anything about that. Well, yes, it does, because the Latin Church became the Roman Catholic Church. They did not get rid of these books. So the intertestamental, the apocryphal books, are part of the Roman Catholic Church's Old Testament, right? All these books are right in there, which means they have authority the way that all of our books have authority. And the book of Maccabees is very, very clear in its instructions to have indulgences and the process of contrition and removing indulgences as you are in some place perfecting yourself before you go to heaven. It is the blueprint for purgatory, and it's right here in Maccabees. So if we keep studying the intertestamental books, we'll get to Maccabees and you'll read it. It's not hidden. It's very clear. So Luther was instrumental in getting the intertestamental books thrown out, because if he's going to fight indulgences in the church, you can't have Maccabees in there, right? So it went back to the idea that said these books were written in Greek. They weren't included in the Old Testament canon with the Jews, so we shouldn't include them in our Testament. Now, there's also problems in these books. These books have issues, and we're going to get to one of those issues pretty quick in Tobit, and there's more than one. And so they say these books are at the Anglican Church. I have it right. Let me think. I get the words right here, right out of the canon for you guys, so I can find it really quick. I probably can't. It is a canonical description of what these books are, and basically just says that they are available to us to use to edify us in reflection of the canonical books, but they are not binding. They don't have the same authority that we place on the other books of the Old Testament. So you can teach from them as a reflection of the Old Testament, but you can't teach from them as a single authority for something, say, like indulgences in Maccabees. Okay, so that's how we get to Tobit. Tobit was just the first one. Tobit was written probably, well, all these books are written in the intertestamental period. So remember the after, oh gosh. It's not Malachi. What is it? It's Malachi.
Yeah,
No.
Malachi is the last book, but
Yeah.
it's not historically the last book written, right?
Right. So after Malachi is when you have all these books. That's this 400 years of dark time. So they've looked at Tobit and said Tobit's probably written about 300 BC. It is was written in Greek and Aramaic. They had both versions of this book in Greek and Aramaic. And here's one of the scandalous things. In 1965, a Hebrew edition of Tobit was found in Qumran, the Dead Sea.
Oh, no.
But they say that old rendition was a New Testament era Hebrew written book. So they took the Greek and wrote it into Hebrew to circulate among the Jews. So it was kind of scandalous, though, because they're saying, oh, no, if it's written in Hebrew, then it can be included into the Old Testament as part of the Old Testament canon. Yeah, so there we are. So now you've got the canon down. You know why it's in the intertestamental books. How come the Protestant churches, Lutherans and Calvinites and like that, as Presbyterians, don't have these at all? They don't have them in their Bibles at all.
Yeah.
We have them. The Anglicans have them in the middle, and we have them as reflective but not authoritative. And the Roman Catholic Church has them through and through, right, in their Bible. And they are authoritative in the Roman Catholic Church as well. And the reason why that you can help reflect on that is because of Second Maccabees is the specific and bold proclamation of purgatory and indulgences.
Now that's the reason that Maccabees there's a question about Maccabees, whether it should be included or not. But what about the rest of the intertestamental books?
Yeah, they're all in there. They said they were accepted from the beginning, and since they were accepted from the beginning, that is the will of God, that they weren't removed. I mean, there was no question about these books being part of the Old Testament all the way up till Luther. But if we look back and see how that worked out, the reason why is because the standard scripture of the church was Latin, and the Vulgate included them. So from that point on, as soon as the Vulgate was completed, they had them in it. The Vulgate was reproduced et al. And always had them in there.
But do all the intertestamental books have problems in them that
Yes.
Yeah, you'll see this.
cause problems for
Yeah.
Protestants?
And I think that's what's going to be really fun and interesting, because people who aren't familiar with the regular Bible, they see all kinds of weirdnesses that we've gotten used to, and we just kind of go, yeah. And so I think it'll be really good for our vision,
Yes.
sharpen us.
Well, we've got one problem. Let's see, it's going to come up. It's in the first chapter. So if we get there, we'll see it. But there's more than one. We'll just find them as they're scattered through like little Easter eggs, they say now with the movies. All right. So who wants to start?
I do.
Let's read. Gosh, how far do we want to go? We want to go Tobit. Let's go through to Mindful of My Heart. Most High save me instead of. Oh gosh, it's just a long story, but all right, let's go.
Let's go to. I have a paragraph break at 10.
All right, let's go there. That's good.
So, the tale of Tobit, son of Tobiel, son of Ananiel, son of Abduel, son of Gabael, in the lineage of Asiel and tribe of Naphtali. In the days of Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, he was exiled from Thisbe, which is south of Kadesh Naphtali in Upper Galilee, above Hazor, some distance to the west, north of Shephet. I, Tobit, have walked in paths of truth and in good works all the days of my life. I have given much in alms to my brothers and fellow countrymen, exiled like me to Nineveh in the country of Assyria. In my young days, when I still was at home in the country of Israel, the whole tribe of Naphtali, my ancestor, broke away from the house of David and from Jerusalem. Yet this was the city chosen out of all the tribes of Israel for their sacrifices. In this temple, God's dwelling place, had been built and hallowed for all generations to come. But all my brothers in the house of Naphtali offered sacrifice to the calf that Jeroboam, the king of Israel, made at Dan on the mountains of Galilee. Often I was quite alone in making the pilgrimage to Jerusalem, fulfilling the laws that binds all Israel perpetually. I would hurry to Jerusalem with the first field of fruits and beasts, the tithe of cattle and sheep's first shearings. I would give these to the priests, the sons of Aaron, for the altar. To the Levites ministering at Jerusalem, I would give my tithe of wine and corn, olives, pomegranates, and other fruits. 6 years in succession, I took the second tithe in money and went and paid it at Jerusalem. I gave the third to orphans and widows and to the strangers who live among the Israelites. I brought it them as a gift every 3 years. When we ate, we obeyed both the ordinance of the law of Moses and the exhortations of Deborah, the mother of our father Ananiel. For my father had died and left me an orphan. When I came to man's estate, I married a woman from our kinsmen whose name was Anna. She bore me a son whom I called Tobias.
Go ahead and read to 15.
Okay. When the banishment into Assyria came, I was taken away and went to Nineveh. All my brothers and men of my race ate the food of the heathen, but for my part, I would not eat the food of the heathen. And because I had kept faith with my God with my whole heart, the Most High granted me the favor of Shalmaneser, and I became the king's purveyor. It's going to be messed up now. Until his death, I used to travel to Media, where I transacted business on his behalf, and I deposited sacks of silver with 10 talents with Gabriel, the brother of Gabrias, at Rages in Media. On the death of Shalmaneser, his son Sennacherib succeeded. The roads into Media were barred, and I could no longer go there.
So can we assume that Tobit was a rich man?
At this time he was. Yeah, during this period. Yeah. It doesn't last though, poor Tobit. Okay, so as we start off here in the beginning, so you have that little lineage thing, 1 and 2. We get that a lot in the Old Testament, son of, and then Naphtali, of course, is the tribe. So he's putting himself in the, everybody understands where he is. And if we were a Hebrew, or if I had thrown it up right here, we would have the Holy Land divided up by the tribes, and you could see exactly where the tribes were, and Naphtali one of them. So then we get into verse 3, and we have that I, Tobit, mine says, walked in the days of my life in the path of fidelity and righteousness. I performed many charitable deeds for my kindred and my people who have taken captive with me to Nineveh and the land of the Assyrians. So
which is Mosul in Iraq, which, remember a few years ago, it was bombed the heck out of? That was Nineveh.
Yep, that's Nineveh. So who does this sound like? Did anybody get a little tickling ear that sounded a little bit like another famous Old Testament person?
Yeah.
It's going to come more, so I won't tip it yet. You'll get it later on if you haven't got it already. There's another Old Testament person this begins to sound a lot like.
So what king is he? Is because he stayed on the right, didn't eat the food of the oppressors or anything like that.
Yeah.
Daniel.
That's not the Assyrian king that he gets to be the servant of. It's the
it is the Assyrian king.
It's the Assyrian king.
So that doesn't make sense. Why would the Assyrian king?
What he's saying is God favored him so much that even the Assyrian king caught on, and the Assyrian king, because God made him do it, gave me this prominence, and so I could still keep schlepping my stuff.
Remember now when the Jews were taken off to Babylon, they were integrated in all levels of society as equals to a large extent, just like Joseph. So Joseph went down to Egypt, and he became second to Pharaoh. Basically, he had all the power of Pharaoh. This is the most.
But he's saying he stayed true to his beliefs, so he basically refused to be an equal.
Well, I think what happened was
You just ate kosher.
I would say, yeah, he's kosher. I would say that the same thing happened that we see in other places, like
Daniel.
in Daniel, where he's a man of honor and
Wow.
was trustworthy. And the king said, this guy is trustworthy. He's not going to steal my money and defile my will, because he serves a God who won't let him do that.
Right, with all these weird little nitpicky
Yeah.
things, he's following through.
Yep.
And yeah, he's
What have the Romans done for us lately?
not.
Yeah. Yeah. So he's telling us a path of fidelity and righteousness. Nineveh, where's Nineveh? Where's Nineveh famous for? Who went to Nineveh?
Jonah.
Jonah.
Jonah and the whale.
Right. So that was a little different period, but this is the same place. And remember, Nineveh was really horrible before, and it's always been horrible. It got a little better after Jonah left, but then it went right back to its terrible ways. So this is the same place. This is this horrible city of corruption. When I lived as a young man in my own country, this is verse 4, my entire tribe of Naphtali. So he's now describing how the entire tribe, certainly there must be other people like him, but for the most part, the entire tribe has left the traditions of the Orthodox traditions of the church and has gone off and done their own thing. Jeroboam was the king at the time. He's the king of Judah, and he made it possible for people, because there's a lot of logistical reasons. People had to travel from all over, as far south as the Sinai Desert, and come all the way up to Jerusalem to pay their tithes and to do their stuff. So Jeroboam made an executive decision and said, I'm going to set up stations, where you can go and do your worship at your station and pay your tithe and satisfy the law at Dan and what was it? Yes, two places. He'll get my ancestor, the hilltop in Galilee, the calf of Jeroboam, king of Israel, he made in Dan. Oh my gosh, yeah. But I alone. So he's got these things in different places. And does that description of the calf remind you of anything?
Yeah, the golden calf.
Yeah.
But there's something else I don't understand,
Mhm.
or that I think I've missed. It has to do with sequencing. Who was the guy that came back and built the wall around Jerusalem?
Ezra.
Nehemiah.
Nehemiah. Yeah.
Ezra, Nehemiah.
Nehemiah, that's what I'm thinking of. That was after they came back from Assyria, right?
Yeah.
That's coming back from Babylon, wasn't it?
Right.
That's from
Also,
the next one.
oh, okay.
That's later on.
Oh, that should have been earlier
didn't-
on, I think,
yeah,
because
they
this
did-
is
yeah,
this is
no.
intertestamental and that was Old Testament.
Yeah, but no.
No,
Oh, remember
Well-
that this book is talking about a different time.
oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I
So, all right, so-
confuse easily.
Yeah. So
Well, That's why we're reading it, because it's so weird.
So let's see why this would have been a bad thing for Jeroboam to do, and why Jeroboam was naughty when he did it. And I find it to you because it's in Deuteronomy. Go back to another duo in the 12th chapter, beginning at the 11th verse, and this is what it says. Then you shall bring everything that I command you to the place that the Lord your God will choose as a dwelling for his name. Your burnt offerings and your sacrifices, your tithes and your donations, and all your choice votives and the gifts that you vow to the Lord.
Yeah.
You shall rejoice before the Lord your God, and together with your sons and your daughters, your male and your female slaves, and the Levites who reside in your towns, since they have no allotment or inheritance with you. Take care, here you go, that you do not offer your burnt offerings at any other place that you happen to see, but only at the place the Lord will choose in one of your tribes. There you shall offer your burnt offerings, and there you shall do everything I command. So this one place is the temple in Jerusalem.
And
So when Jeroboam set up these little stations, he was directly violating the instructions in the book of Deuteronomy.
with the split with not Solomon, but his son, you flip through Kings and Chronicles, and you see that all of the kings of Israel were terrified that if people kept going to Jerusalem, they would rejoin Judah.
Right.
And so, I mean, 2 weeks after they split, they had, another system, and everybody kept improving on this other system so people would feel it was okay not to go to Jerusalem.
Yeah, that's right. And you got to have a symbol for your God. And so they've already run it around one time with Moses. So it's the calf.
Yeah, the Egyptian calf.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why they put it up there. So this is why Tobit is saying, I have stayed true to the will of God. He's talking about Deuteronomy. So he's saying
Right.
all these things that they're doing here are violating the basic rule of our faith, the basic tenet of our faith, but I have not done these things. I have seen it right here. I alone used to go often to Jerusalem for the festivals and to prescribe for all Israel by long-standing decree. I alone, of all my tribe, I would go there and I didn't find any other buddy from Naphtali in Jerusalem. I'm the only one, because you could go way back there and never have to walk this far. So he's pretty righteous, this guy. He's been doing the right thing. He's like totally faithful, and he's down with the Old Testament way back in the time of the Exodus and the repeat in Deuteronomy. Okay, so now he's taken away off to Nineveh and is living there, and he tells this great story. Most High granted me favor. This is verse 13, and status with Shalmaneser. Shalmaneser is the guy that did the initial conquering of the northern kingdom all the way down to Jerusalem. Remember that the northern kingdom was conquered and they stopped. They kind of wrapped around Jerusalem. They kind of left Jerusalem kind of in the middle and went here and here with a little, like a pearl. And they didn't conquer Jerusalem. That came later.
Jerusalem was such a tactical nightmare.
Yes, for everybody.
That's a good strategic choice.
Well, he jumps way far ahead right here when you get to 14, where he says, when Shalmaneser died, he said, before I would go to Media, which is Persia, right, which is Iran, to buy goods for him there. I also deposited pouches of silver, 10 talents. Anybody want to guess how much money that is in today's money? 10 talents.
10 pounds of silver?
10, well, it says 10.
It's crazy.
Yeah, he was super rich.
Yeah, I see. I think that I thought a talent was like $70,000, but I don't know where I come up with that.
It was $10,000 in today's money. So back then that was a fortune. I mean, he would never had to worry about anything ever again. He could have gone anywhere and he was super rich. And today's money, $10,000 back then would be like $1 million. I mean, it's just crazy money.
And this is why the king would let him do his money too, because he didn't need any.
Yeah. And he was honest. He was an honest guy. So he did his thing. And
yeah.
So then he says here, Gabby, you've got that one. When Shalmaneser died and his son, Sennacherib, became the king, everything went to pot. The roads in Media became unsafe. I think Carolee, yours says were guarded. So I could no longer go to Media. So what happened there? Well, Sennacherib was the guy who decided, I'm going to conquer Jerusalem after his dad. So he went down and attacked Jerusalem. And believe it or not, Jerusalem held out. And he didn't have the will to continue doing this. It was hot and stinky down there. So he just kind of gave up and came back, said, we'll do it another day. But he was really ticked off that he did all that work and he sent all those people and he got money and he didn't win. So when he got back to Nineveh, he just decided he was going to kill all these dang on Jews. Just like, as soon as one of them does something wrong, just kill them and throw them over the wall. That's just it. Just have done with them. So Tobit couldn't go anymore to Media, to Persia, to do his thing. And under this new king, he was a non gratis, so he wasn't even working for him anymore. So all that money that he had stored up, he now was separated from, didn't know how he's going to get back to get it, if he's ever going to get it, if those days are over. All right. No longer unsafe, no longer able to go to Media. All right. Who wants to keep going? Let's read 16.
You have to start here. They're all mixed up.
Let's go 16 to 20. let's go 16 to 20, and then we'll jump to 21.
And so that would be up to
Who
you.
wants to read 16 to 20?
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay.
On the death of Shalmaneser, his son
Sennacherib.
Sennacherib succeeded the roads into Media. The roads into Media were barred, and I could no longer go there. In the days of Shalmaneser, I had often given alms to the brothers of my race. I gave my bread to the hungry and the clothes to the naked, and I buried them when I saw them. The bodies of my countrymen thrown over the walls of Nineveh. I also buried those who were killed by Sennacherib, for when he retreated from Judea in disorder after the king of heaven had punished his blasphemies. In his anger, Sennacherib killed a great number of Israelites. So I stole their bodies to bury them. Sennacherib looked for them and could not find them. And Nineveh went and told the king it was I who had buried them secretly. When I knew that the king had been told about me and saw myself being hunted by men who would put me to death, I was afraid and fled. All my goods were seized and they were all confiscated by the treasury. Nothing was left me but my wife Anna, and my son Tobias.
Okay.
I think I'm allergic to your book.
So now you see, I was foreshadowing a little bit what Shalmaneser has gone through. He's ticked off. He came back. He didn't get his way, and so as he's come back, he's just starting to kill the Jews off because he's annoyed.
Which is always a bad decision. I've just got to tell you, it never turns out well. Somebody tries to talk you into that. It's been
don't do
10
it.
times. Don't go there.
So remember now, Tobit's he's a good guy. He's trustworthy, he's faithful, and he does what he's been told. I mean, he's following the Old Testament instruction, right?
You think about if he's burying all these dead people, there are so many rules for them about they can't do whatever. They have to go through ritual cleaning
Right.
after they touch anything dead. So this was a big process for him. It wasn't just taking the bodies, digging them home and putting them in there.
Right.
Even if he could go to Jerusalem, the fact that he touched these dead bodies would make doing anything weird.
Yes, well, he talks about that as we come up, and just a little bit, I think in 2, he talks about what he has to go through, just a little bit. But we've got this here, so he says that he tells us about how he did all these wonderful things. He was very charitable, give bread to the hungry, clothing to the naked, and then he worked with the people that had died and been thrown over the wall. He took their bodies by stealth and buried them. So when Sennacherib looked for them, he couldn't find them. So what he had done was why do you think it means that he threw them over the wall? What does that mean? Why would he do that? What's the point of that?
Get rid of them?
Yeah, but
Trash.
But it's saying here that after he's done this, he's going to look for them. So why would he do that?
I guess make sure they didn't survive.
No, think. Go ahead. Let's go.
Make a point
Go ahead.
that is to make a point that they were trash, that they were useless, they were nothing, and they were going to be treated that way.
Yes. So warp ahead. Susan hit the nail on the head. Warp ahead to the time of Jesus. What was lining the road on the way into Jerusalem?
The crucifixion.
Crosses?
The crosses. Yeah.
So they let everybody know. They had, all these billboards, all these dead guys hanging there of what's going to happen to you if you break the law here. So he threw them over the wall in the front of the city, so that when people coming in the city would see all these dead bodies laying all scattered around and know that if they broke the law, they would get killed and thrown over the wall. So Tobit would go outside the wall and grab the body and go bury it. So
But it wasn't just that they broke the law, it was that they were Jewish.
Yeah, well, they broke the law, but if I came as a visitor to Nineveh, I wouldn't know if they were Jewish or not. I just know that they were all scattered around, which means they'd broken the law.
Dead bodies scattered around would make being in the city pretty unpleasant.
Well, the walls of Nineveh were supposed to be big, just like the walls of Jerusalem. So having them outside the wall, it was pretty far away. Remember, these walls are also buildings. So the walls are like 30, 40 feet thick.
Like the moat.
Yeah. And there's obviously no windows on the outside. So the smell would be kind of going up and like,
That would make people visiting the city think twice about even,
Yeah,
I'm not going here.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the stench along the road to Jerusalem was a lot worse than this. So he was told probably by his guards. I doubt that the man got down on a horse and went and looked for the dead bodies. He was told by his guards that the bodies that were supposed to scare everybody are disappearing. They're all gone, and they don't know why. So he did this thing. So where did this come from? If you look in the Old Testament and you find that there are, as Susan said, there's instructions to feed the hungry and to clothe those that need it and to take care of the poor, the orphan, and the widow. Jesus talks about this. He says, this has been our instruction from the beginning, and I'm telling you to keep doing it, right? And then he tells that thing where he said, if you did this, if you feed the hungry, you fed me. If you clothe the hungry, if you clothe those with clothes, you clothe me. If you visit them in prison, you visited me. So this is all Old Testament stuff. But what about this dead thing? That's not anywhere in the Old Testament. Go find the dead and bury them. The only thing we have in the rules of the Old Testament is don't touch the dead or you're unclean. Well, it is somewhere. Guess where? It's in another intertestamental book, the book of Second Esdras. And this is what the book of Second Esdras says. Guard the rights of the widow, secure justice for the ward, give to the needy, defend the orphan, clothe the naked. Okay, we're all on the same team, right? Care for the injured and the weak. Do not ridicule the lame, protect the maimed, and let the blind have the vision of my splendor. Protect the old and young within the walls. And when you find anyone who is dead, commit them to the grave and mark it, and I will give you the first place in my resurrection. Now pause and be quiet, because your rest will come. So he was just fulfilling the instructions in the book of Esdras. So we can't find it someplace else in the book. It's very, very clear, just like in Maccabees, indulgences are very clear. This is very, very clear that God is telling the people that if you find a dead person, you need to bury them and mark their grave. So he was just fulfilling exactly what it says in Esdras. Very clear.
So how far back did that go? That rule, Ezra?
Esdras was written in, let's see, I looked at that briefly, but I don't remember. Esdras was written, suggested it's not in this one. I think it's still around 400.
So, but it had to be before 300 because Tobit's written in 300.
Right. Yeah, so it's a little older than Tobit.
Okay.
So that's cool. So he's using this other book that we wouldn't necessarily have if we weren't reading Esdras later on to guide him in the burying of the, or there's another book. There's other extant literature that we don't have, that's not here. That didn't make it, didn't survive.
And that rule just didn't endure.
Yes, didn't endure because it seems to be in conflict, doesn't it? When we get, if we do Esdras, it seems like the rule in Esdras is in conflict with the purity laws in Leviticus.
Yeah.
So does that mean somebody's making it up as they go along in Esdras? Then it doesn't fit what everybody else knows going on in Leviticus. Could this be one of the problems with that book? That it's not matching up with the other books? I mean, the law about not touching dead people and is very clear. And it's real. I mean, we just saw it in The Chosen, right? It's very clear. It's a huge deal. It's not just that you have to obey a ritual to be clean. It's that you just don't do it. You just don't. You don't do it. It's like a violation of something even larger.
You wouldn't, I mean, the boring ordinary, say King David or Solomon, Israel, your mother dies, you don't move out.
No, that they have, we were talking about this a little while ago in a different group. They had undertakers just like we do that would come and do this stuff, and they had their own ritual. They would stay unclean and stay to themselves, and that was part of their life, just like mourners.
And it had to be done by sundown of that day.
Mhm.
So it was very quick, and the decomposition process hadn't really set in. So if you found a body 2 or 3 days later or 7 days
What a
later,
mess.
that was horrible. So, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
if you were going to touch dead, it at least needed to be done by sundown.
right. And wrapped up and not actually be touching. But you can imagine if you found, Larry's been out in the sun for 2 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The men of a certain village went and got Saul and his sons' remains. I can't remember the group. They left them out. I mean,
Yep.
they went and took them and they burned them, and then they buried the bones, I believe.
Yes.
And David praised them for that.
Yes. I think probably because, we're all talking very in absolute terms here, but if you're, you live out in the boons and your family member gets COVID and dies and you got to bury him, you can't get somebody from town to come out and do it. You got to do it. And that means you sacrifice your purity, and you can't be with the family, and you can't eat with everybody, and you got to go through this ritual, and you voluntarily gave up and undertook this hardship to perform this task. So it's a matter of gift giving of yourself.
Yeah, and digging holes to bury people in, that's a
Sure.
lot of work.
Yeah, it is. So and Tobit was really, he was really going for it. Good guy, right?
Yeah.
All right, so let's read.
Let's finish the chapter.
Can we do that? Oh, we
Yeah.
can. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's only 5 pack or
Yeah.
something.
All right, so go ahead, read. So what, we stopped at 15, did we? So who wants to read 16 to the end, which is 22?
I will. Let's see.
We pass.
And Ninevite went and told the king who I was. It was I who had buried them secretly. When I knew the king had been told about me and saw myself being hunted by men who would put me to death, I was afraid and fled. All my goods were seized. They were all confiscated by the treasury. Nothing was left me but my wife, Anna, and my son, Tobias. Less than 40 days after this, the king was murdered by his 2 sons, who then fled to the mountains of Ararat. His son Esarhaddon succeeded Ahikar, the son of my brother Aniel, was appointed chancellor of the exchequer for the kingdom and given the main ordering of affairs. Ahikar then interceded for me, and I was allowed to return to Nineveh, since Ahikar had been chief cupbearer, keeper of the signet, administrator, and treasurer under Sennacherib, king of Assyria, and Esarhaddon had kept him in office. He was a relation of mine. He was my nephew.
Yeah. Okay, so
So he's sort of back.
yeah, really uneventful, the end of the first chapter, isn't it? He's back, his family's back in, they're all in good, and he's really
He lost his old stuff, but you can always rebuild.
he's rebuilding. He's got his nephew's the cupbearer to the king, and he's his favorite nephew, and he's the favorite uncle, and all's well. So I remember I told you that somewhere in the first chapter was one of those places that's a problem for the poor book of Tobit, and I'm afraid this is where it is. So it says here, the son of Esarhaddon succeeded him as king. This is verse 21. He put, and this is the one that Carolee and I think are gonna have a problem too, Ahikar, my kinsman, Aniel's son, in charge of all credit accounts of his kingdom. He took control over the entire administration. His nephew, his favorite nephew, right? Ahikar. And then in 22, Ahikar had been the chief cupbearer, keeper of the signet ring, treasury accountant, the credit accountant under Sennacherib, king of the Assyrians, and Esarhaddon appointed him the second to himself, like Joseph back in the day. He was, in fact, again, here we go, my nephew, and of my father's house and my own family. So why is that a big deal? Well, it's a big deal because Ahikar is a folk hero that has been around for hundreds of years before Tobit was written. He's a folk hero that you find in other books in other countries. He's a folk hero who does marvelous things and always rises up to the top and finds himself in the best conditions with the most favorable life possible. And they didn't even change the name. It's the same.
It's sort of like Job isn't, we don't know that he's a real person.
Yeah, this is obviously not a real person. This is not his nephew. This is a reference to this folk hero that had been around through multiple cultures, who had this same moniker, where he came from nothing and then became the most celebrated, the most terrific, the most well-known, the most rich, rose to the top, and he took care of all of his family. And of course, that's his favorite nephew, and he's his favorite uncle. So it's the place where we have a problem, because this is obviously, this whole end here, 21 and 22, is lifted from these other cultures, and it's multiple cultures. It's not just one. Multiple cultures had this same guy with different stories, folk stories, that he's just appeared in here.
Well, if he was your nephew, wouldn't he be your
I was
favorite?
gonna say, you wouldn't hide his light under a bushel.
Oh, certainly not. So yeah, it's one of the reasons when they look at chapter 1, they say, oh, or when you look at the book, you say, oh. No,
And there are more wrinkles
yes, to
that are
come.
more obvious than this later. So don't
Yes.
worry, you didn't, this isn't the only one.
Oh, no, we got some juicy ones coming up that are still in there. Okay, well, we've done great. Got through. Now you guys are experts, at least on the canon and understanding of where, if we don't get to Maccabees, at least you know where indulgences came from and how it got into the Roman Catholic doctrine and why it's still there, and how come it's not in the Protestant doctrine and how it got taken out. All that's there, and how we got the Old Testament and why our Old Testament is 66 and theirs is 73, because they added those books back in. And now we're into Tobit. So we got Tobit under our belt. A very and anybody have any tickling yet about who he sounds like? Who he reminds you of? Okay, don't say it. We'll pick him up next time, and I'm sure as we get closer to his life, you'll be going, oh, and you'll know it right away. All right, that was great. I hope it was great for you too. It's always fun for me. I hope everybody has a wonderful night. Gail, didn't have a chance to say hello to you. How are you tonight?
I'm good.
I'm glad. You look great. I would know you anywhere.
There she is.
There you
am.
go.
But there she is.
All right, everyone. Have a wonderful night. I hope everybody is good. Oh, listen, I found this out just before we started. Marion Wright has COVID. And
No,
Again, oh dear.
I found out this morning, and Chester was feeling weak, and so they took him off to the emergency ward, and he was released again to his son and went back home, and he's in the care center at the home with COVID. He's positive too.
He's got COVID also.
Yes.
how seriously is it?
They had it before, and it wasn't really bad for them. So I'm hoping that it'll be a repeat of that. She told me that right now they have 18 confirmed cases at the Masonic home, but it could very well be there's a lot more. I can't imagine there's not a lot more coming, but they haven't closed down the place yet. So everybody's still doing their thing. Yeah. We'll see. Keep them in your prayers, and the folks over there at the Masonic home, that this is not an outbreak, because it can be really, really devastating for them.
Yeah, because they're the
Shirley,
huh?
are you using the Jerusalem Bible?
Yep.
Good. Good, because that's why I was able to follow you.
Good.
Ah, yay.
It gets a little kind of wacky.
Well,
Brothers
the
and
introduction
sisters.
of mine, they said there's the Vulgate version and there's the Greek version. And so we're following the Greek version. But when there's a bit that wasn't in the Greek that is in the Vulgate, those things are italicized.
Yes.
So my numbers go all over the place, 12, 13, 15, 11.
Mine's
So
the
again-
New Jerusalem Bible. So it's almost exactly the same.
So,
But
yeah.
it says, I read the whole thing today, and there's a lot of sisters and brothers that are really wives they're wives and husbands, but they're calling each other sister and brother.
Right. The sisters and brothers is more like the brotherhood of, You know, my brother's in the army. Okay, they're not your brothers in the army. They're everybody who's in the army with you.
Okay,
We'll find out more about that as we go. Remember now, I like what Carolee just said, great thing to keep in mind. If you've never figured it out, never had this before, you now know what the Vulgate is. It's the Latin version of the Greek and Hebrew. It was done by Jerome. He was asked, the Pope, the Bishop of Rome asked Jerome to do the entire Bible in Latin, which he did. One man.
What year was that?
Oh, gosh.
What century?
I think it was like 600.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well
Like
after
maybe
the
500.
Nicaea.
Yeah. So that's the Bible that lasted all the way up to the Protestant Reformation. And that's what everybody was reading, Latin Vulgate.
No, I'd always thought that at Nicaea, that's when they decided when all the Bibles, Old and New Testament, or all the books, Old and New Testament went into the Bible.
Yeah, but
Then
the
328
Catholic guys,
Council of Nicaea met in
Everybody was Catholic
28,
then, weren't
and
they?
then again in about 30 years later in Constantinople. So the second meeting is actually the Council of Nicaea, Constantinople. Like we have the Nicene Creed
right.
that was ratified at the Second Council. So if you really want to be proper, it should say, and we should be saying, that we recite the Nicene Constantinopian Creed, because that's really what it's called, because it was ratified in the two. They added the all the text about the Holy Spirit at the Second Council. So this was to decide, really the Nicene Council came together to talk about heresy, to talk about monotheists and others who had claimed that Jesus was either all God and not man, or all man and not God. And they came together to say that both of these were heresies, and they're going to put their foot down. And of course, putting their foot down was creating the creed. The creed is the outward expression of the understanding of the person of God in the church. So they have the Son, the only Son of the Father, begotten, not made.
Now, all this junk, but the Nicene Creed amuses me because there's 4 sentences for the Father and the Holy Spirit, and then the rest of it is all about justifying Jesus Christ.
That's because all the heresies that were going on there that were spreading around and had been spreading around for years, that had said, for instance, there are our brother and sister Christian churches, mostly of the Oriental persuasion Christian churches, that are monophysites. They don't believe in the dual nature of Christ. They believe that he was all God, never stopped being God, never became holy man. He was always God. So he's one nature, not two, where we believe he has 2 natures. He's holy God. We say it in every Eucharist, completely God and completely man, both at the same time. What's the great little thing? Let's see, 4 Gospels, 3 persons of the Trinity, 2 Testaments, 1 God. Right in there, or 2 natures, either way. Okay, guys, have a great night. Be well, sleep well, and I look forward to seeing you on Sunday. Whoop.
hey, Sunday's not like you said at the vestry meeting, it was the picnic.
It's the picnic, yes.
Okay, but the Creator calling